They called it a violation. To me, it was fabric and memory, red, white, blue, and my father's hands teaching me how to fold a triangle tight enough to keep the past from leaking out. The morning I found the fine taped to my door, the flag was still moving in its slow conversation with the wind, as if it didn't know it had suddenly become a crime. I mounted the bracket on a Sunday because that's when my father used to fix things that weren't broken yet. The sun was clean and the sky the kind of ridiculous blue that makes you forgive traffic and politics and the way the dog always finds the one muddy spot in the yard. I drilled into the porch column with the careful reverence he taught me, press, don't punch, and slid the pole into place. The flag unfurled like a breath. It wasn't big. I'm not reckless or showy, despite what the HOA likes to imagine about people who use their porches for anything other than ferns. A standard house flag, the kind you can buy at the hardware store along with light bulbs and hummingbird feeders. The cloth snapped once in a breeze and then settled into its polite sway. I stood there longer than I'd expected to, thinking of Dad's voice the last time we folded his funeral flag at the VFW, how he'd said quietly, "Respect isn't complicated." I didn't cry. I did what I always do when my chest gets too full. I went inside and made coffee. By Monday morning, the coffee was gone and a paper was stuck to my front door with blue tape that had pulled a comma of paint up with it. The paper had a lot of capital letters and a line for a check. Violation. Notice. Unauthorized exterior display. Fine. $100. Remove within 24 hours or fines will accrue at 25-day. I read it twice. My brain did the thing where it refuses to accept a sentence and then quietly translates it into something worse. Unauthorized exterior display. As if I'd hung a billboard, not a flag my dad would have saluted with that half smile that said, he knew life was messy and still worth standing up straight for. I stood on the porch with the paper in my hand and watched the flag move. The morning light got itself tangled in the stripes. Mrs. Alvarez across the street waved with her knuckles, the way you do when a grocery bag is biting into your fingers. "Pretty," she called, then squinted at the paper. "Oh, they got you?" "Apparently," I said, trying for a shrug, landing somewhere closer to a twitch. "Unauthorized." She made a sound like a disbelieving laugh swallowed in church. "Last year they said my wind chimes were a noise hazard. I told them the birds were louder. The notice said I could appeal at the next compliance committee. Meeting, 3rd Wednesday, 9 a.m., which is a hilarious time if you're trying to make sure only people who don't have to go to work can show up. There was a phone number for the management company and an email for compliance. There was also a paragraph about community uniformity, which managed to use the word harmony and threat in the same breath. Inside, my kitchen smelled like toast and the lemon cleaner I only remember to use when someone else is wrong. I spread the notice on the table and took a picture for my notes. A little line of ants was investigating a crumb near the sugar bowl. I blew, gently, and they scattered, regrouped, tried again. I felt an unreasonable kinship with them. I called the number. A woman with a soft voice and a hard script answered. "Ridgegate Community Management," she said. "How can I assist you today?" "I received a violation for a flag," I said, keeping my voice level. "A U.S. flag mounted on my porch column. It's within size limits and properly flown. I'd like to understand the rule. Flags are permitted on designated holidays, with prior board approval," she said, and I pictured a laminated sheet somewhere with those exact words highlighted. No exterior alterations to facades without architectural approval. "It's a removable bracket," I said. "And there's a federal law." My throat tightened a little at the word federal, like I wasn't allowed to say it out loud in my own kitchen. "The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act? It says associations can't restrict owners from displaying the U.S. flag on their property. Reasonable restrictions about time, place, manner, safety, sure, but not a blanket prohibition." Silence humming with keyboard clicks. "You can submit your appeal in writing," she said finally. Per policy, fines will continue until the matter is resolved. Per policy, I repeated, tasting the phrase like a lemon rind. Great. I thanked her anyway because my mother didn't. Raise someone who gets nasty with receptionists. When we hung up, I stared at the notice until the letters wanted to rearrange themselves into something true. There is a binder in my junk drawer that I used to ignore. CC&Rs, bylaws, rules, and the rest of the alphabet soup they hand you with. The keys and a smile that looks like relief. I put it on the table and flipped until I found the sections that talked about flags and architectural harmony, about exterior attachments, about approval processes measured in weeks. The Flag Act wasn't in there, of course. You have to leave your house sometimes to find out what governs it. I texted my neighbor Eli, not that Eli, a different one who fixes bicycles in his garage and always has a spare bungee cord. You ever heard of anyone getting fined for a U.S. flag? Within minutes. Sylvia on the board hates clutter. She thinks flags are visual noise. Also, there was a guy who hung a sports team banner last fall and all hell broke loose. But U.S. flag? That's new. I pulled out my laptop. The law came up easily. Freedom to display the American Flag Act of 2005. I read with the kind of hungry focus I usually reserve for mystery novels and parent emails that begin with, "Just a quick question." A sentence leaped up at me. A condominium association, cooperative association, or residential real estate management association may not adopt or enforce a policy that would restrict or prevent a member of the association from displaying the flag of the United States on residential property, subject to reasonable restrictions necessary to protect a substantial interest of the association. Reasonable. Substantial. Words you can stand inside if you know how to hold them up. I printed it. The machine coughed it out like it had opinions. I highlighted the parts that made my pulse slow, that made the world tilt back to level. I took a picture of my flag in good light, the bracket clearly mounted, no dangling wires, nothing dangerous or gaudy or whatever word they'd choose to. Cover what they didn't like. On my phone, the neighborhood group chat was already simmering. Some people don't care about flags. Some care too much. Most care about not getting bullied for being themselves on their own porch. Take it down, my friend Mina texted. Fight later. Stop the fines bleeding. Leave it, Eli, the bicycle magician, wrote. Sometimes you don't move the thing that's right just because someone put a price tag on it. The clock on the microwave said 10:41. 24 hours would be tomorrow at 9:12 a.m. because that's when I'd first seen the tape. My classroom would be between a lab demo and two 7th graders arguing about whether a beaker can be a cup. I folded the notice along its crease and slid it into a clear sleeve in a new binder I labeled, with a teacher's petty satisfaction, flag. Then I wrote a list on an index card, because lists are where I go when I need to feel like a person. Who can move through a day, photograph, print law, draft appeal, email board, document everything. Ask Mrs. Patel if she saw who posted the notice. Breathe. Outside, the flag stirred and then stilled, waiting like a good dog. I stood in the doorway for a while, the notice warm in my hand from where my anger had been holding it, and decided that this time I wouldn't fold. Not today. Not for a clause that pretended to be about harmony but sounded a lot like hush. They wanted me to fold the flag. I folded paper instead, into a letter sharp enough to cut their policy down to size. I woke before the alarm the way you do when your house has been called into question. The flag outside made its small, rhythmic sound in the morning breeze, cloth against air, steady as a heartbeat. The blue tape scar on my door looked smaller in the daylight and somehow meaner. At 7:06 a.m., my inbox pinged. Friendly reminder, immediate action required. Compliance. Had attached a photo of my porch from across the street like I'd committed a crime and fled the scene. The subject line felt like a smile with teeth. I put coffee on and took out the binder I'd labeled flag. It looked ridiculous next to the sugar bowl and the bowl of apples, like I'd set homework beside breakfast. I slid a fresh index card out of the stack. Today's list: draft appeal, cite law, ask for hearing, request fine hold. Document everything. The appeal letter came out of me the way a lesson plan does when you know the objective in your bones. I wrote line by line, slow enough to keep the heat out and the facts in. To Compliance Committee, Board of Directors, Management Re. Violation A1129, unauthorized exterior display. U.S. flag. I am appealing the violation and fine issued on date regarding the display of the United States flag mounted on a removable bracket on my porch column. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 prohibits residential associations from adopting or enforcing any policy that restricts a member from displaying the U.S. flag on residential property, subject only to reasonable restrictions necessary to protect a substantial interest, e.g., safety, structural integrity, property maintenance. My display is safe, properly mounted, and within normal dimensions, the 3x5. It does not obstruct sightlines, sidewalks, or architectural features. I request 1. Immediate rescission of the violation. 2. Reversal of all fines. 3. Confirmation that fines are suspended pending hearing. 4. Written clarification of any reasonable restriction the association believes applies here with specific reference to a substantial interest. I also request an internal dispute resolution hearing under bylaw section see state statute, and I request all communications regarding this matter be in writing. Respectfully, my name, Lot. I attached 3 photos: the bracket, the flag at rest, the clear path of my walkway. I attached the act itself, yellow highlighter, crisp as sunrise. I CC'd the anonymous compliancee and Gavin, the manager who signs emails, warmly like a blanket thrown over a puddle. I printed a copy and slid it into a sleeve that crinkled in a satisfying way. Paper isn't power, but it can be armor at school. I was halfway through explaining why you don't heat a sealed container when a ping shook my pocket. I ignored it until lunch, when the room went quiet, except for the pencil sharpener's low whine. I opened the email and let my pulse do what it was going to do. Thank you for your appeal. Per policy, fines will continue to accrue until the violation is remedied or the committee rules. Hearing. Wednesday, 9 a.m., Clubhouse Conference Room. Your presence is required. Required. As if civics class didn't already have a chapter this week, I called the number. State law requires an opportunity to be heard before fines, I said, keeping my voice in the register I use for lab safety. Calm, unarguable. Not after. Per policy, the voice said again, like a pull string on a doll. You can request a hold. I am requesting a hold, I said, in writing, which you already have. We'll note it, she said, which is the bureaucratic cousin of maybe. After last period, I drove to Mrs. Patel's. She answered with soil on her hands and a look that said she'd been waiting. Doorbell camera caught the notice. She said, 6:02 a.m., woman in a visored cap, clipboard, blue tape, no knock. She sent me the footage. Sylvia, short hair, brisk gait, stepped into frame, tore a strip of tape with her teeth, posted the paper with a practiced slap, and walked off like she'd delivered a singing telegram and didn't want to hear the song. I added the video to the binder via a QR code I wrote on a sticky note because I am, at heart, an enthusiastic nerd. On the group chat, the debate had metastasized. Flags are fine, but not everywhere, one neighbor wrote. My husband served. Try. Me, another said. A retired Marine down on Pecan posted a picture of his porch flag with the caption, "Come for mine, bring a ladder." I winced. Bravado always makes me think of the cleanup, but I understood the thrum underneath. Eli, the bicycle magician, texted, I've got a copy of the rules from 2018 before they updated them. It had a line, "Nothing herein shall..." be construed to prohibit the display of the U.S. flag as permitted by federal law. That line is gone in the current version. He sent a scan. There it was in Times New Roman, the sentence that had been erased like an inconvenient footnote. I printed it and put it next to the act. Rules change. Laws don't because someone finds them fussy. As the sun dropped, I stood on my porch and watched the flag loosen and tighten itself. A man I didn't know jogged past and slowed, glanced at the blue tape curl on my door, glanced at the flag, and then nodded. It felt like he'd stamped my paper with a human approval I hadn't realized I needed. At 7:23, another email. Hearing notice attached. The PDF had the same brisk tone. Alleged violation. Potential remedies. Note that failure to appear could result in additional fines and legal action up to and including lien. The word lien walked into my kitchen like a cold draft and sat down at the table. It's one thing to argue over what you can tape to your porch. It's another to have someone imply your house could be collateral for their feelings about harmony. I printed the notice, smoothed it, and slid it into the sleeve beside the law. I texted my principal and begged for a last-minute sub. "I'll owe you a week of lunch duty," I wrote. She replied with a thumbs up and a go-get-'em that made me tear up at my own desk. I called my mom because sometimes that's what you do before you put on boots and go to a fight. "Your father would be proud," she said. "He'd also tell you to be precise. People win with precision." After we hung up, I wrote out what I would say in the hearing, not because I didn't know it, but because saying it once to a piece of paper makes it easier to say to people who forgot they work for you. I kept it short. Law, safety, reasonableness, the line they erased, the fines that have no right to grow. At 9:11 p.m., a car slowed in front of my house, headlights washed. The porch. A camera flash popped, a quick white flower of light, and then the car rolled on. The flag lifted once and fell back into its quiet, stubborn sway. I stood there barefoot on the wood Dad taught me to sand, the night warm on my skin, and felt fear and focus take turns in my chest. Wednesday at 9 was a pit they thought I'd fall into. I planned to build a bridge over it in sentences. The wind changed and the cloth answered. I closed the door and put the binder by my bag. In the morning, the fines would tick like a metronome meant to rush me. For now, the house was. Mine, the rules were words, and I knew how to read them. Some rooms are built to make you small. I walked into this one carrying a binder big enough to remember my name. The clubhouse hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and old pool water, the scent of places that prefer order to people. Conference room. A was set with a folding table, 3 chairs on one side, 1 on the other. Between them, a small plastic cup of pens, a pitcher of water, a desk flag on a brass stick that someone had bothered to dust. I stared at the tiny flag a beat too long and felt my jaw set. "Good morning," said Gavin, the manager, arranging his laptop like it could shield him from weather. His emails always end warmly. In person, he looks perpetually chilly. "We'll be recording for the record." The compliance committee filed in. Sylvia, the visor from the doorbell video, took the center seat, posture taut as a bowstring. To her left, a man with realtor hair and a folder labeled architectural. To her right, a woman in a mauve cardigan who looked like kindness and trouble in equal parts. "You'll have 3 minutes," Sylvia said without looking up. Then questions. I set the binder labeled flag on the table and felt steadier for the click of its rings. "I understand," I said, and stood because sitting makes me say yes too easily. I slid the first page forward. The freedom to display. The American Flag Act, highlighted like sunrise. I'm appealing violation A1129, unauthorized exterior display. The display is a U.S. flag, 3x5, mounted on a removable bracket. The act prohibits associations from enforcing policies that restrict members from displaying the U.S. flag on their property. Reasonable restrictions are allowed to protect substantial interests, safety, structural integrity, My bracket is safe and properly mounted. It obstructs nothing. Sylvia's pen twitched. Our rules require prior approval for exterior attachments, she said. Uniformity is a substantial interest. Uniformity, I said, keeping my voice the one I use when students forget goggles, is not a trump card. The Act doesn't list matching porches as a substantial interest. You can regulate placement, size, hours of illumination. You can't prohibit the flag. Realtor Hare leafed through a copy of the rules like they might rearrange themselves into something helpful. Mauve Cardigan watched me the way a good nurse watches a patient talk, measuring breadth and bravado in equal parts. I slid the photos across, bracket detail, clear walkway, the flag at rest. Then the 2018 rules Eli had sent, with the line they'd removed circled. Nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit the display of the U.S. flag as permitted by federal law. I set it beside the current edition where that sentence had vanished like an inconvenient truth. We updated to streamline, Sylvia said. Too many redundancies. Redundancies, I repeated soft. Or protections, Gavin cleared his throat. Per policy, fines continue until the committee rules. Per state law, I said, turning to him without losing the thread. Fines require notice and an opportunity to be heard before they accrue. I requested a hold in writing. You acknowledged it. The doorbell video shows notice affixed at 6:02 a.m. without knock. I'm here now. Please suspend the meter. Mauve Cardigan leaned in. Do you illuminate at night? She asked, tone gentle, like she was inviting sense, not setting a trap. I take it down at sunset, I said. My father taught me that. There it was, his name without saying it. A tremor moved through me that wasn't fear. I slid the last item forward, a single-page statement. Requested remedy, rescind violation, reverse fines, adopt a policy complying with the Act, size, placement, safety. Put the old sentence back. If you want a bracket color, pick one. If you want a mounting height, specify it. But stop fining people for something the law says they can do. Sylvia's mouth tightened. We've had problems, she said. Sports, flags, political flags, banners. It gets messy. Then write the rule that fits the mess, I said. The Act covers the U.S. flag. Write separate guidance for sports and slogans. Don't pretend they're the same. Silence settled like dust. The tiny desk flag didn't move. Mine outside would be stirring in the heat. Realtor Hare cleared his throat. What about architectural harmony? He asked, clearly attached to the phrase. Harmony is not unison, I said. It's different notes that agree to share the air. Mauve Cardigan blinked, and I saw it land. Sylvia tapped her pen against the table. We'll confer, she said. Step into the hall. The door closed with that soft, padded slam all official doors have. The hallway was cooler than the room, and smelled faintly like copier toner and something fried. Somebody's lunch planning its own appeal. I texted my principal a thanks for the sub. I texted Mina, in the box. I wanted to say more, how the tiny flag on the table felt like an accusation and a promise, but emojis won't do that work, and I was tired of flattening things. Through the door, muffled voices. A phrase rose and fell. Preemption, maybe Gavin's. Another, optics, definitely Sylvia's. Time passes slower when your money is on a meter and your name is in a sentence that starts with violation. The door opened. Mauve Cardigan stood there first. She had the look of someone who had just lost and won the same argument. We sat. Sylvia folded her hands. The committee will recommend to the board that we clarify flag policy per federal law, she said. The words clipped, as hedge clippers. Effective immediately, fines will be held. Pending board ratification, you may keep the flag displayed provided it is maintained and taken down at dusk. A breath left me I didn't realize I'd been bracing. And the existing fines? Gavin glanced at his laptop. Held, he said. If the board adopts the recommendation, reversed. When? I asked. I heard the edge in it but couldn't sand it down. When will the board meet? Next Tuesday, Sylvia said. We'll place it on the agenda. Mauve Cardigan pushed a form toward me. For the record, please submit an architectural form for the bracket, she said, almost apologetic. We'll approve it. Thank you, I said, and meant it for the outcome, not the ordeal. As I stood to leave, Sylvia's eyes flicked to the binder. You came prepared, she said. Not a compliment, not one. My mother says people win with precision, I said. I teach 7th graders. It's the same in here. Outside, the flag moved in a breeze I hadn't felt in the hall. Mrs. Alvarez waved from across the street. Well, half a win, I called. The rest on Tuesday. Bring cookies, she said. They're less mean when their mouths are full. Back inside, I slid the held email into the sleeve where fear had been living and wrote on a fresh index card. Board meeting. Public comment. Policy language. Take Dad's coin. Don't shake. As dusk would come, I would take the flag down and lay it across the table, smooth the stripes with my palm like a napkin before a meal. For now, it flew. For now, the meter had stopped. For now, the room that tried to make me small had made room for the law. But Tuesday had teeth, and I could hear them in the quiet. Some meetings are designed to tire you into silence. I walked in with a coin from my father in my pocket and a binder fat enough to keep my voice awake. By the time the sun slid down behind the oaks, the clubhouse parking lot was full. People stood in clumps, talking in the careful way strangers do when they've suddenly discovered a shared nerve. Mrs. Alvarez had a plate of store-bought cookies she called peace offerings. The retired Marine from Pecan, Keegan, I learned, wore a ball cap that said nothing and said everything. Eli, the bicycle magician, rolled up, locked his bike to a sign that said no bikes, and grinned like a man who enjoys small rebellions. Inside, the room was all folding chairs and fluorescent lights, and that particular smell of chlorine and lemon cleaner that attaches itself to places that prefer rules to people. At the front, a long table with name placards: Marla P., President; Todd H., Vice President; Shireen A., Secretary; Ron K., Director. Gavin sat at the end with his laptop, warmly at the ready. Sylvia from the Compliance Committee took a front row, seat like a bird invited to join the cats. I slid into a chair near the aisle. In my pocket, my father's coin, slick, warm, old brass, pressed a circle into my palm. He used to keep it in his pocket in the service, a superstitious thing, he said. A reminder that the small can be heavy, he'd joke, flipping it and catching it like a magic trick. I rubbed the edge with my thumb and felt the burr smooth. Marla tapped the mic. Good evening. Thank you for attending this special agenda. Item: clarification of the association's flag policy. She smiled, but it sat on her face like a rented thing. We love this community. We respect our country. We also have to maintain architectural harmony. She said the last 2 words the way a dentist says root canal, public comment first. Keegan stood, hat in his hands. Ma'am, he said, addressing everyone and no one. I've saluted that flag in places where nothing else made sense. What you do with sports banners and slogans is your business, but don't make the U.S. flag a crime. That's not harmony. That's hush. A woman I didn't know spoke next. My husband is from Honduras, she said softly. We fly the U.S. flag because we chose here. Please don't fine us for choosing. There were dissenters, too. A man in a linen shirt frowned at the idea of visual noise. A woman worried the neighborhood would turn into a car lot of cloth. I didn't love their metaphors, but they were here. Everyone was here. When it was my turn, I stood with my index card, because that's how I keep my voice from running off without me. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act preempts any policy that restricts members from displaying the U.S. flag on their property, I said, steady. Reasonable restrictions to protect a substantial interest, safety, structural integrity, are allowed. Uniform porches isn't a substantial interest. You can specify bracket color, size, limits, dusk or illumination. You can't make it holidays only, and you can't require pre-approval to hang a removable bracket. You removed a sentence in the 2018 rules that acknowledge the act, put it back, align the rest. I slid copies of the act to the table, highlighted, like sunrise. I slid the doorbell video still, Sylvia's visor, blue tape biting my paint, without comment. My father's coin pressed against the bones at the base of my fingers. It felt like a period at the end of a sentence. Todd leaned into his mic. What about people who leave them tattered or hang them wrong? We had a guy last year who... Right for that, I said. Maintenance, illumination, placement, enforcement after an opportunity to cure. Don't ban to avoid nuance. Shireen, the secretary, looked at Gavin. What does counsel say? She asked. Gavin cleared his throat. Counsel's memo notes, federal preemption. Recommends allowing display of the U.S. flag without pre-approval, with reasonable standards. Size up to 3x5. One flag per lot mounted securely, removed at dusk unless illuminated, bracket color to match trim, no obstruction of egress. Recommends rescinding current blanket restriction. A murmur moved through the room, the sound of a held breath finding a way out. Marla's smile thinned. We have had problems, she said. Political flags disguised as patriotism. Then say political flags, I said, before my better angel could swat my knee. Don't say patriotism. She blinked. Sylvia, front row, clicked her pen like a metronome. Order, Marla said, mostly to herself, and squared a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. Ron, the quiet director at the end, cleared his throat. I move that we adopt counsel's recommendation, rescind the violation, reverse fines, and direct compliance to cease issuing citations for U.S. flag displays consistent with the policy, he said, surprising everyone and himself. Silence. Then paper shuffling, then... Second, Shireen said, voice stronger than mine felt. Marla hesitated. I'd like to table until next month, she said. We need to consider... optics. Optics are for cameras, Todd muttered, and then, into the mic, we have a room full of owners. Let's vote. They looked at one another like people, at the edge of a pool, arguing about who goes first. Gavin stared studiously at his laptop, which was not a raft. Marla tried one more angle. We could limit to federal holidays? Preempted, Gavin said, almost apologetic. Counsel's memo is clear. Holidays only would not be considered reasonable. Marla's lips pursed around a word she didn't say into a microphone. Fine, she said, and the consonant sounded like it might cut her tongue. Vote. Aye, Ron said, quick, like pulling off a bandage. Aye, Shireen said, steady. Todd looked at the room, then at me, then at the little desk flag and said, Aye, 3, enough. The words slid into me like a key in a door. Marla's gavel hit the table. Motion passes, she said, and the room exhaled as if it had collectively discovered its lungs. Gavin, draft policy for signature, compliance to suspend enforcement immediately, reversed fines to be credited within 10 business days. Sylvia's pen went still. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The blue tape scar on my door pulsed in my memory and then faded a shade. People clapped, not wildly but with relief. Keegan touched the bill of his cap and nodded once. Mrs. Alvarez nudged the cookies down the row with the solemnity of communion. As the meeting broke apart into conversations and lists and the grind of chairs on tile, Marla leaned into her mic one last time. Please remember, she said, we're a community. Civility matters. I thought of the blue tape, of the visor at 6:02 a.m., of the word lean sitting in my kitchen like a winter draft, and decided not to test my civility out loud. I slid my father's coin back into my pocket. It felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Outside, the sky had softened into that cotton blue that forgives. The flag on my porch moved as if it had known this all along. As I reached my car, a plain white envelope waited under the wiper. My name on the front, block letters. Unfamiliar. I opened it with my thumbnail and slid out a single photocopied page. A draft policy, margin notes in a different hand, bracket color, illumination, size, and one penciled line that didn't belong. No flags other than U.S. flag unless... The sentence broke off, as if whoever wrote it had been interrupted or changed their mind. Underneath, in a small, neat script, still work to do. Don't stop now. Victories die in footnotes if you let them. The penciled unless in the margin of that draft policy told me the fight had moved from the microphone to the fine print. I turned the photocopy over and over like it might confess. No flags. Other than U.S. flag unless... The sentence stopped where intent starts. Underneath, still work to do. Don't stop now. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I could guess. Mauve cardigan, Shireen, had watched me at the hearing like a person who knew what rules were supposed to do. The board had voted. The fines were paused. Yet there it was, an unless sharp enough to cut the win in half. I made coffee because that's what I do when I'm about to read myself into a corner. The house was a chorus of quiet, the refrigerator's soft buzz, the dog breathing the way old dogs do, the flag outside giving one slow wave to the morning and then settling. I laid out what we had, council's memo, the act, the erased 2018 line, the draft policy with bracket color, illumination, size, and that vague, dangerous unless. My phone chimed. Eli. Heard anything? And a second later, Mrs. Alvarez. Mi hija wants to fly a small Honduran flag next to the U.S. on Independence Day. Will that be okay now? I stared at both messages until my guilt and my stubbornness came to an agreement. The law couldn't carry everything, but it could carry more than one porch. I started searching state law. It's a strange comfort to watch statutes unfurl, all those subsections like nesting dolls. There it was, tucked into the property code. An association may not prohibit the display of the flag of the United States, the flag of this state, or an official flag of any branch of the United States Armed Forces. Another section allowed service, star banners. Some states list POWMIA explicitly. Mine did too, under official military flags. The law was narrower than hearts and broader than the draft line wanted it to be. I printed the sections and highlighted them with the care of a person trying to steady her own hands. Then I wrote the simplest thing I could think of on a fresh page. Proposed policy. Allowed without prior approval. U.S. flag, state flag, official U.S. military branch flags, POWMIA flag, service star banners, size up to 3x5, displayed on a mounted bracket or pole attached to the dwelling safely and securely. Standards. Bracket color to match trim. 1 bracket per facade. Secure mounting. Remove at dusk unless properly illuminated. Maintain in good condition. Do not obstruct egress or sight lines. Freestanding flagpoles require application due to structural considerations, objective criteria, timeline for decision, no fees for bracket installations on dwelling, enforcement, notice and opportunity. To cure before fines. Fines suspended during appeal. Catch-all. Nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit the display of flags protected under federal or state law. I sent it to the board and to Gavin with a note that tried to be polite without being soft. The unless is where people get hurt. Please don't make me explain that to my neighbors 1 porch at a time, Shireen replied 10 minutes later. No emojis, just a line that sounded like her voice through the mauve. "Thank you. I'll push for this language." Mina came by with iced tea that tasted like childhood and a look that said planning. "They'll try to make the bracket fee a barrier," she said, settling at my table like a general. "Or make you repaint it to the exact shade of approved beige with a swatch number you can only get from a store in the next county." I smiled because she knows me too well. "Then we'll put to match existing trim and be done. Pick a swatch, pick a fight. I'm done buying tickets to their little wars." The dog harumphed like he agreed. By afternoon, the group chat had turned into a civics class. Keegan wanted to fly the Marine Corps flag on the anniversary of his enlistment. A quiet man from the end of the block asked about a POW MIA flag for his father. Mrs. Alvarez's daughter sent a photo of a small Honduran flag. We talked about what the law allowed and what the policy would. It felt like sorting marbles into jars, this one here, this one there, knowing some would spill and we'd have to decide together whether to pick them up or let them be. At 5:06, an email, policy workshop, Thursday 6 p.m., open to owners. Bring comments. It felt like an invitation and a dare. I dressed for the workshop like I was going to court in a building that sells swim passes. The room was smaller than the town hall, the same fluorescent patient. At the front table, Marla with her practiced smile dulled to Matt, Todd with a pen he clicked when he was thinking, Shireen with a legal pad, Ron with a stack of printed comments, and Sylvia with her visor hooked on the back of her chair like a threat. Gavin put the draft on the projector. "Section 1, permitted flags," he said, and his voice was less warmly, more weary. The vague "unless" had grown teeth. "No flags other than the U.S. flag, unless otherwise required by law, and only on federal holidays." Shireen cleared her throat. "Council says holidays only isn't reasonable," she said. "Also, state law requires us to allow state and military flags." Sylvia tensed. "If we open the door, people will bring politics in through the window." Keegan lifted a hand. "Ma'am," he said, amiable steel in his tone, "the Marine Corps existed before your window treatments. Let us honor what the law already honors." I took my turn. "You can control size, placement, and condition," I said. "You cannot collapse protected flags into U.S. only. You can't require pre-approval for a removable bracket. You can require illumination or removal. You can require a bracket to match trim." I smiled a fraction. "You can even pick the beige." A chuckle rippled through the room. Marla watched it and recalculated. Gavin typed in real time, U.S. flag, state flag, official U.S. military flags, POW MIA, service star banners, up to 3x5, bracket color to match trim, secure mounting, dusk or illumination, good condition, enforcement after notice, fines suspended during appeal. Sylvia tried. "One more angle." "One flag only," she said. "Per lot." "Per facade," Shireen countered, pencil steady. "We have corner lots. We have porches and garages. Per facade keeps us out of arguments about what counts as lot." Marla sighed the way people do when they realize the current is stronger than their preference. "Fine," she said. "Per facade." We solved 2 more fights before they started, freestanding poles as a separate process with clear engineering criteria, and no application fees for brackets. Poli-sci by way of porch hardware. On the way, out, an envelope waited under my wiper again, like a habit. Inside, a printout of a screenshot. My compliance portal had a new entry. Architectural violation, bracket color mismatch. Status, pending. The timestamp was an hour old. Mina peeked over my shoulder. "Petty," she said. "They're writing tickets in pencil while we're writing law in pen." I took a photo of the projector screen with the new policy draft and attached it to a reply. "Bracket will match trim per policy language we just agreed to. Please see draft. Also, per hearing, fines are suspended pending resolution." I CC'd the board, Shireen, and for good measure the general inbox, because sometimes you copy the room to remind the room it exists. At home, I laid my father's coin on the binder and felt its familiar warmth settle into my palm. The flag, outside, made a soft sound like someone smoothing a sheet. The workshop had felt like progress. The petty had felt like proof that progress makes someone nervous. Tuesday would bring the vote and the credits on my account. Thursday had given me the sentence I needed in writing, glowing on a screen. What we could do, what we couldn't, what lived in the unless. I turned off the porch light and watched the flag in the dark as it quieted in the absence of wind. Somewhere in someone's head, a pen was still moving. I planned to be the one who wrote the period. Victories don't count until the ledger does. I woke up checking my portal like a weather app, waiting to see if the storm had really passed or if it was just circling back with a different name. Tuesday morning, the world pretended to be ordinary. The coffee gurgled, the dog tripped over his own enthusiasm, and the flag gave a single slow wave like a nod to the day. I opened the compliance portal anyway, breath held, the way you do at the end of a scary movie when the music drops out. There it was. Violation A1129. Status held. The petty bracket color mismatch. Status pending. A red line meant to make me flinch. I took a photo of the bracket against the trim, the colors so matched you'd think they were related, and emailed it with one sentence. Per draft policy, bracket matches trim. Please resolve. No reply. Just the blinking cursor of bureaucracy. By evening, the clubhouse parking lot looked like it remembered us. People who hadn't said more than hello in months were talking with their hands. Keegan from Pecan wore the same quiet cap. Mrs. Alvarez had tinfoil-wrapped cookies again, for good luck and low blood pressure. Gavin hovered near the projector with the expression of a man who wished warmly came with a Kevlar vest. Marla wore resolve like a blazer. Todd had his clicking pen. Shireen set her legal pad down like a small altar. We'll reconvene for the flagged policy item, Marla said, tapping the mic. The gavel's thud sounded tired. Council has provided updated language. Gavin put the draft on the screen. The unless that had haunted my kitchen was gone, replaced by lines that felt like rails instead of walls. U.S. flag, state flag. Official U.S. military branch flags, POW MIA, and service star banners permitted without prior approval up to 3x5 mounted securely on dwelling. Bracket color to match trim. Remove at dusk unless properly illuminated. Maintain in good condition. Do not obstruct egress. Freestanding poles by application with objective criteria. Notice and opportunity to cure before fines. Fines suspended. During appeal. Nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit flags protected by federal or state law. Shireen read it aloud, voice steady. We also recommend removing the pre-approval requirement for removable brackets and eliminating any fees associated with bracket installation. Sylvia's visor hung like a question mark on the back of her chair. One flag per facade, she said. Last push, per facade, Todd echoed. Not per lot. Corner houses exist. Marla scanned the room, eyes calculating. We've received many comments, she said. We love our community. We respect motion, Ron said, cutting through with a gentleness I hadn't expected. To adopt council's recommendation as read, rescind violation A1129, reverse fines, and direct compliance to cease citations inconsistent with this policy. Second, Shireen said, pencil tapping once like a heartbeat. Marla tried for a delay and got nowhere. The vote came like rain after pressure. 3 ayes, 1 reluctant yes. The gavel landing with a sound that meant something this time. Gavin cleared his throat. Compliance portal will be updated within 24 hours. Fines reversed within 10 business days. It was as close to an apology as we were going to get. Public comment was brief and warmer than last time. Keegan stood and lifted the bill of his cap. "Thank you," he said, simple as a salute. A man in a linen shirt confessed he hated visual noise, but hated blanket bans more. Mrs. Alvarez's daughter asked, shyly, about a small Honduran flag for her mother on Independence Day. Shireen wrote a note and said, "We'll start a separate decor guideline with clear windows of time, reasonable, human." We spilled into the parking lot like air leaving a pressure cooker. The sky had that forgiving blue that makes you want to say yes to a walk. Marla passed near me and paused. For a second I saw the person under the posture. "You'll keep it in good condition?" she asked, almost a plea. "I will," I said. "You'll keep the policy in good condition?" A corner of her mouth conceded something like a smile. "That's the job," she said, and walked on. At home, the portal blinked. Violation A1129, resolved. Notes, reversed per policy, credit pending. The petty bracket entry flipped from pending to closed with a single line. Matches trim. The $100 fine turned into a negative number on my account like an apology that didn't know how to write itself. I stood on the porch and let myself feel it. Not triumph, exactly. Relief. Alignment. The way a room feels when someone finally opens a window. The flag moved in its patient conversation with the wind. I pressed my father's coin against my palm until that old burr felt smooth. Neighbors emerged like a weather pattern. Keegan installed a small Marine Corps flag on his garage facade, bracket tucked against the trim like it had been there forever. Mrs. Alvarez and her daughter stood on their porch with 2 little flags and a pot of geraniums, US and Honduras, smiling. At each other in that tender way mothers and grown daughters do when they both know what something costs and what it gives back. "Just for today," her daughter said, meeting my eye. Shireen, walking her dog, nodded. "We'll write it," she promised. A white SUV rolled by slow. Sylvia sat in the passenger seat, visor in her lap. She didn't wave, she didn't scowl. She looked for once like a person in a neighborhood, not a sentinel in a fortress. That will do, I thought. For now. Inside, I slid the flag binder onto the shelf beside the cookbooks and the green shoebox of old letters. Not away so much as reachable. The coin went back into my pocket where it belongs when I'm done needing to squeeze it. I wrote the last line on the index card stuck to the fridge. Policy adopted. Fines reversed. Bracket approved. Next, decor. Guidelines. Before bed, I took the flag down and laid it along the table, smoothing the stripes the way Dad taught me. Palm flat, gentle, and everyday reverence. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like something is missing. I folded the triangle tight enough to keep the past from leaking out. And when I set it by the door for morning, it felt like more than fabric again. It felt like a sentence finished with a period I'd waited a long time to write. Numbers don't clap, laws don't sing. But the night air through the screen sounded a little like applause, and for the first time since the blue tape scarred my door, sleep came easy and stayed.